Well, I'm down here at the border on the Red River. There's BNSF line that goes up to Grand Forks and goes south to Wilmer and Minneapolis. Through Wilmer, you can go down to Sioux City, Lincoln, Kansas City. Wilmer's a really nice little town. Yeah, on the other side of the river is Minnesota. And this is North Dakota on this side. I believe it's the only river or major river in North America that, or in the U.S. that flows north. Flowing that way. But I was gonna, somebody suggested, and I don't know why I didn't think of it, about how I acquired the name Shoestring. Let me set my camera up. Well, about 1990, I'd heard a song on the radio called Shoestring, sung by Mel McDaniels. And I liked the lyrics of it about a train rider, so I chose Shoestring for the name. And although I did not try one bit to live like the lyrics talk about, my life ended up identical to the song lyrics, all except the wearing the hat on backwards. I've never wore my hat on backwards, but if you Google or YouTube Mel McDaniel Shoestring, you'll hear the lyrics, and it's almost exactly identical to how my life ended up being when I chose it 31 years ago. About 1991, about a year after I picked it, that name, it almost becomes Shoestring, the famous canoe thief. Me and some old boys were Jump Off Steve and a couple others were in Whitefish, Montana on the High Line. We were camped out under the bridge, the railroad trestle where the Whitefish Lake drains underneath the Burlington Northern tracks. Then it was Burlington Northern. About a block up, we was drinking Myers rum. Pint after pint of Myers rum. We took a bath in the river, got all clean, washed our clothes. And I looked upstream about a block, and I seen a green canoe docked to a tree stump with a rope. And it's broad daylight too, drunkers, cooter brown. I walked up the street and around the trees, went out to that canoe, and there was an axe sitting in the tree stump it was tied to, anchored to. I took that axe and chopped that rope, fell in the water 4 or 5 times before I got in and stabilized the canoe, took that axe and was pedaling back down to camp, that block down. I kept falling out, getting back in. By the time I went that block, slowly downstream, I looked to my left where our camp was and Jump Off Steve's like this. Then there was a cop car and a couple of guys and a little kid sitting out there. And I remember yelling, "Look what I found! Look what I found!" So I paddled with that axe ashore. The cop went, he goes, "You know who this man is here?" I figured it was the guy I stole the canoe from, and it was, but it also happened to be the mayor of Whitefish and his little boy. And I said, "I swear to God, I found the canoe." He said, "No, I was looking out of my back window of my living room when I seen you take it." I was like, damn. Well, there goes that night. So I went to jail overnight, and they let me out the next day, but yeah, it never did really get into too much. That was probably the most wildest thing I ever done. So Jump Off Steve, they were all waiting on me when I got out of jail, and they said, we ought to name you Shoestring, the famous canoe thief. Stole the mayor's canoe. Yeah, Whitefish, Montana. Let me think of maybe some other stuff people ask me. I guess the most unique ride I ever had, I got off of a regular train. We hit the siding in Kearney, Nebraska on UP. And I was at like a grain elevator. And later that night, it was about 10, 12 below zero Fahrenheit. And a local came up and pulled up, hooked up about 10 or 12 cars, and I got on that back grain hopper. That worker sees me. He goes, man, it's too cold for you to ride back here. I can't let you ride. You'll die. And I thought he just wasn't gonna let me ride, but he said, you come up here and get on this lead unit with us, with the engineer and the conductors. And it only had one locomotive on it because it was just a local, didn't need much power. And goes, where are you heading? I said, California. He goes, well, we're just going far as North Platte Bailey Yard. Where do you want off in North Platte? I guess 6th Street will work, overpass. So they helped me get my gear up in the locomotive. And after the engineer got it up to, I don't know, 35, 40 miles, the top speed that he could go, he didn't let me touch anything, but he let me sit in the engineer's seat. That was probably back in 97 or 98. And they gave me the rest of their lunches out of their lunch pail, and one of the guys gave me $5, and the engineer gave me a $20 bill. I thought that was the coolest thing. I probably would have died back there. A lot of people ask me, where do I ride in the wintertime? Down south? I'm like, nah, it's all burned out. Everybody goes down south in the winter. I always ended up going north where it was miserable but better to me because there wasn't as many people. Now in the summertime, I always ended up down south where it was hot as Hades. But yeah, they had a train pull up a while ago, and he started slowing down, and then he stopped, and I thought, well, hell. I started looking for a ride, but he started backing up. What he did down there at Fargo Yard Office, there's a split like this. Well, I can't bend my fingers anymore. There's a split like this, and he come off this line and pulled up. The conductor hit the switch, and he backed the train down that other line to let it set. So I'm fixing to walk down there. That is going to be a southbound train. And it don't matter if it goes to Wilmer or Minneapolis or Chicago. Like, if I go to Wilmer, I can go through Sioux City to Kansas City and then over east. But if I go to Chicago, I'll make up my mind whether I want to go out in Michigan, out towards New York, Schenectady. And if I make good time, I might go on out Massachusetts, back out to Dover, New Hampshire, and Bangor, Maine, up that way, and ride that Pan Am Railroad. Used to be Guilford Railroad. I rode the old Delaware and Hudson a few times, and the P&W, the Providence Worcester Railroad. That's a good little short line. But it all used to be pretty much Conrail back in the day. Once you get from Chicago through Elkhart, Buffalo, Syracuse, Albany, south of Albany, there's a big yard called Selkirk. Then from there, you can go just basically anywhere in the Northeast. I jumped on one train out of there, it was hitting the curve there in Selkirk. I didn't care where it went. Ended up taking me all the way to the Bronx. Wow, man, by the time I got into the city, man, that yard was so secured. I mean, double layered fence. So I ended up, New York City police officer ended up letting me out of the gate of the railroad yard. Didn't do anything. Trying to think of some other little stories. I do have a video going through the Hoosick Tunnel about 2 or 3 years ago, where I'm crossing the Hudson River. And another nice little place is up in Whitehall, New York. There's a bunch of short line railroads that branch out of Whitehall. Whitehall is kind of a yard where they split up cars that are going in those 4 or 5 different directions. Back in the day, you could catch Guilford out of there straight up to the Rigby yard in South Portland, Maine. Then from there, you catch it on up to Bangor. Back in '92, from Bangor, I just got on the train going anywhere there and went north. Went to, I think it's St. Stephen's, Maine, and crossed into New Brunswick, Canada. And that's how I got to Newfoundland in '92 the first time. Went all the way to North Sydney, Nova Scotia, and I hitchhiked. I rode the freight train into Halifax, then hitchhiked to North Sydney. And back then it was $16 to walk on the Joseph Smallwood Ferry. I don't even know if it still runs. You might could Google Joseph or the MV Joseph Smallwood. And it held 350 cars, 110 18-wheelers, and 1,200 passengers. They had a casino on board the ferry and everything, but just $16 to walk on without a vehicle. About 110 miles across the water, icebergs. You get to a little town called Port Basque, Newfoundland. And it's about 550 miles across to St. John's, Newfoundland. But anyway, that's all I can think of right now. I'll do it because a lot of my stories that I want to tell are hardship stories. I guess I'll do them separate. I don't want to tell a funny story and then tell a story where I almost died. So I'll kind of do them in segments like that, I guess. But so now you know. Yeah, right up here you see the trestle turning. This track here crosses. There's a line that runs east and west, goes to Mandan, Bismarck, Billings, Laurel, but it also branches off about 30 miles out and goes to Minot. That's your low line and high line, and this line here goes to Grand Forks. Once you get to Grand Forks, you can go west to Minot. They got a yard there called the Gavin Yard, or you can go east out of Grand Forks and go to Superior, Wisconsin. Now that is a beautiful ride through going to Superior from Grand Forks. Go through northern Minnesota, all them beautiful lakes. It's almost like a boreal forest. Yeah, this line crosses that main BNSF line down there, and it continues down to Wilmer. But there is a spur off this that links this track to those. I've actually caught a train going this way, thinking I was going to Wilmer, and it took that curve into Moorhead, Dilworth, and took me down to Minneapolis. But yeah, I didn't know they had a bike path. But North Dakota here and Minnesota pop on the other side. You can see the leaves have just been blooming out here. Can't believe Minneapolis, they're almost, I'd say 70-80% full bloomed. How much of a difference that 270 miles made. There's downtown Fargo, and Dilworth and Moorhead are over here. They're kind of like smaller little suburb cities in Minnesota that are actually considered the greater Fargo area. My first time through here was probably 91, 92, I guess. A lot of people ask me, how'd you learn all the rails? I'm like, well, it took about 7 years of just non-stop riding freight trains. Any freight train that moved, I got on and went to the dead end until it stopped and yarded. I got off, got my food and water, and got on another one and went somewhere. For 7 years, 365 days, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, I did that, and I just learned all the rails that way. But since the UP merger and SP, Conrail, and all those, it's really not changed that much as far as crew changes, but it's kind of harder to tell when you want to switch railroads. Like East St. Louis, if you wanted to go to Avon or like Indianapolis, you caught Conrail. You looked for blue and white Conrail engines in East St. Louis, the Gateway Yard. That's how you knew you were going to Indianapolis. But now it's all CSX mixed in and UP mixed in, Norfolk Southern engines mixed in. So that's what made it a lot harder after the mergers. Anyway, that's it for now, I guess.